of all the things I've done in my career, working in the gaming world is probably one of the hardest jobs. And it isn't because building games is particularly hard. It's building great games with a great team that's all pulling on the oars together is hard. Because you're just so disparate in the types of people that it takes to build a great game. The magic really is leadership. If you see a studio that's consistently coming out with great games, I'm going to show you a studio leader who's really good at this job.
Yeah, and the employees are happy too.
This podcast is brought to you by ISU Corp. Are you having trouble with your software projects? Is there a project that's taking too long or a technology you can't handle? We can help. We are ISU Corp, experts in custom software since 2005. With almost 20 years of experience, we can solve any technical problem from new businesses to satellite software. We've done it all. Let us turn your ideas into reality. Learn more about how we can help by visiting us at www.isucorp.ca. Your solution starts here.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders in Tech, where we're shining the light with leaders in technology that are really making this world a better place. I have the privilege that have Doug back with us. This is the second episode we do because we simply ran out of time. So Doug, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, David. Really, really pleased to be here.
Doug, for the audience, can you remind everybody who you are, where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
Yeah, my name is Doug Hiebenthal, and I kind of split time between Phoenix and Seattle. And for the last 30 plus years, I've been in technology, and for the last, let's say, close to 8, I've been CTO of a number of different companies.
Wonderful, Doug. Thank you. And your involvement with the high-tech industry has been remarkable. Last time we had the chance to discover your leadership, your technology, your diverse teams. We talked about Xbox. I think we talked a lot about Xbox.
Quite a bit, yeah.
PC and console gaming industry. We talked about software upgrade and cost of innovation. All kinds of different things. And also application development on the cloud, because you were also involved with Azure for Microsoft. Were you?
Yeah, I was not directly involved with it from a team perspective, but when I was part of the Halo team that built Halo 4 for Xbox. And when we acquired that technology, acquired is a weird way of saying it because we actually owned it, but Bungie was the company that was building it. Microsoft acquired Bungie, and then right after Halo 3 completed, there was a divestiture. Bungie became an independent company again. Microsoft kept the IP. And so I became an executive producer on that project. And we decided to port the whole back end over to Azure. And that was one of the first real mainstream applications of Azure in a public setting. And so we spent a lot of time working with the Azure team, Microsoft Research as well, because we did some really interesting things around the way we were managing threads in the cloud. So we did a lot of really interesting work in that space. And so it was one of the really sort of, again, an opportunity for me personally to be kind of on the pioneering stage of some technology. It was really fun.
What do you attribute that privilege that you had to work with so many exciting projects that not even 0.5% of the technologists get to work on?
Well, I think I've had a pretty charmed career, being in the right place at the right time, and working with some great people who have respected the work that I've done enough to say, hey, come work with us on this new thing. And that's been very lucky for me. It's been a really great. I've had many great opportunities because of people I've worked with in the past.
That's actually a blessing, and it's one of the lessons that I want the audience to understand. One of my mentors told me, "You never burn the bridges." Never burn the bridges. And what does that mean? Even if you want to leave a job, or you're not satisfied with the way things are, especially if you're in IT, you maintain relationships and you try to be the best person. You try to do unto others as what you want them to do unto you, right?
Without a doubt. And I'm very blessed to still have my mom in my life, 83 going at 84 years old. And we just had a conversation similar to this yesterday where I was venting about an issue, and she's like, you can vent to me all you want, but don't reply to the mail. It's a great advice, right? Great advice. Pick the person who you trust and you can vent to, but then let it go at that and let it wash over you. Because for certain, I'm in the process of acquiring a new job right now, and two CEOs that I've worked for in the past and an SVP for Microsoft, all were my references. And those, any one of those easily could have been a bad relationship instead of a good relationship. And so those are the things that help you in the long term. I mean, really and truly, it may feel good in the moment to sort of lash out or vent, but in the long term, it's a small community, technology, particularly in the leadership ranks. And the likelihood that you're going to run into somebody at some point that has worked with you in the past is very high, very high. And people get to know people for sure.
It's interesting and fascinating because I made that mistake once. I let my ego and my arrogance take a better hold of me. But it's the first time that I did that error, and I never did it again because I paid for it dearly. So the first time that I actually learned this lesson was when the director where I was working at saw something in me, and he got hired up by a multinational, like it was like a 10 steps ahead, right? That type of promotion. Mm-hmm. And 6 months later, he calls me up and he says, David, let's have dinner. And so I went up to Toronto, have dinner in this fancy hotel. And he told me, I want you to come work with me because you did amazing where we met, your current job. And I said, oh, the problem is that, I live like an hour away and I will spend more money in the gas than whatever you can offer me. And then he said, well, how much do you want? And I said, I don't know. How about double? I'm like, what? Yeah, double the salary. I'm like, are you sure? So I'm like, I have to talk to my wife, but that more than makes the extra gasoline that I have to spend.
I can afford the gas.
Yeah, so that was a beautiful upgrade for me. Like I quickly jumped into a leadership position, architecture leadership position that I didn't deserve. But he just saw something in me and he built me up as a technology leader. And he paid me double what I was making, because that's what the position was paying for. Mm-hmm. The problem with that is that I had the illusion that I deserved it. Not at the beginning. It took 2 years until I thought, and the thing is that I was making so much progress in that job. Like, people were like saying, oh, you're doing great, congratulations, and you hit this mark and you deliver on time, and you spend half the budget, and it was a large corporation. So they gave me so much praise that I actually started believing that it was all me. It wasn't me, it was my team.
Right.
So exactly. 2 years later, sure enough, one of those problems happened when I thought it was the guys above me that were at fault, and I just decided to quit and get another job. And at that time, the senior vice president of technology sat me down. He told me, David, please just wait at least 2 months just to get your bonus, and you'll give us a big favor because we were in the middle of a big implementation. And I said, no, thinking they cannot do anything without me, right? So I left with my 15 days notice. I burned that bridge. Horrible experience. The other place that I went to was not even a quarter of the job expectations that they told me that I was going to have. I had to walk 7 blocks in the snow to the office because there were no parking spots for me. Well, I was having a privileged parking spot in this other place. Anyways, it was a horrible thing. And then I actually had to call them and apologize for how stupid I was. So I will never do it again because I brought, and then they told me again, right? He told me again, remember I told you, never burn the bridges, because when you let pride to take the better hold of you, or anger, if you are in a moment of high emotion, it's the worst time to make a decision.
Worst time. I disagree. You know, you said something really important there, right? That I think all of us get caught up in. That I am so important that they will fail without me. And the reality is that's almost never true, right? You know, there might be some very, very, very narrow circumstances where that might be true, but generally speaking, it's never true. You know, the most important engineer, the most senior engineer, the person who invented your core technology, you know, the CTO, it kind of doesn't matter. The collective intelligence of the group, and I think we talked about this last time, this notion of the overlapping ranges of what you know and what you don't know, and what you don't know, right? The collection of all the people who have that overlap is what makes the thing successful. An individual is just one piece of it, and the whole thing doesn't fall apart when the individual leaves. It's just one piece that's missing that has to be replaced or live without. But yeah, I've seen that many times. I've done it myself, and I've seen other people do it as well. It's like, well, you know, you can't live without me. And it's like, well, it turns out we can. And you know, if you base a decision on that, particularly a hasty one, you'll regret it, truly. And so it's a good it's a painful lesson to learn. I'm sure you, as you've said, you learned it. I learned it, and I think other people have as well. But you know, hopefully, you and I talking about it can save other people from learning it that way. They can learn it from hearing that really and truly, everyone is replaceable at the end of the day.
And you know, it's interesting because what I just told you at the beginning, you know, do unto others as you wish they do unto you. I actually read it last night with my wife. We were reading the Bible, and it's called the Golden Rule. This has been shown for 2,000 years ago, and I never thought that I would have find it, you know, in the book of Matthew, and I have tried to apply that in my life. And now the thing is, when you look at this rule in the secular world, what they say is the opposite. They say, don't do unto others what you don't want them to do unto you. So they put it in a negative context. And yesterday I was analyzing, and it's so important because it looks almost the same, but it's not the same. One is positive. Right. So one is saying, actually, perform a duty in a way that you will like them to perform it to you. The other one is like, stay behind and don't do anything that right. You don't want them to do you. So it's passive, you know?
And in this particular case, right, I think it's universal, right? You know, there are so many things that we take from either faith or from our own philosophical views, right, or the way we approach problems. Every now and again, right, you will find an absolute universal rule that crosses all those boundaries, whether you know, are strong in your faith or not, right, or whether you're strong in, you know, your beliefs. But that particular one, right, like if you don't want to be treated that way, don't treat others that way, right? It's just that simple. And I completely agree. And you know, there were days in my career where I was a bull in a china shop, and you can probably find lots of people who would say so. And oftentimes it was, you know, in the context of, hey, I get things done. So if there's a wake, there's a wake, right? You're happy that I got things done. But the reality is you can find a way to get things done without leaving a wake.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's leadership, right? That's when you really have become something that not only can bring technical value to an organization, but can bring leadership value. And both those things are important.
Doug, what has been the project where you had suffered the most, but you also had the most fulfillment when the project ended and it was successful?
You know, I'd call out two that I worked on at Microsoft. Of course, Xbox, the original Xbox that we launched in 2001, would be certainly one of the most difficult things that we've ever done, or that I've ever done, because so much of it had to be built from the ground up. Microsoft didn't have any notion of building hardware in that context. We didn't really have any notion of what it meant to be responsible for a platform that was a walled garden, right? Everything that Microsoft had done previously had been open, right? Open to developers, open to anyone else, open to PCs. But Xbox was, hey, we control the platform and we control the rules and we validate the content, all of those things. We have all the contracts that allow people, right? You can't build on the platform unless we say you can. There were a ton of things that had to be done differently there, and learning about that and figuring out, and then knowing that we had a very specific time frame we had to launch. With the competition with PlayStation, there wasn't room for failure, and you only can really launch once a year, right? It's Christmas time or nothing.
Right.
And so that was a lot of pressure, but believe it or not, probably the higher pressure job for me was Microsoft's music portable called Zune.
I had one of those.
Zunes are great devices.
That MP3 player it was like, people were talking about the iPod, but it was the first version of the iPod, so it was so basic. And then I got my Zoom device and I was showing them to people. I was like, this is Microsoft and it rocks. We had like 10 times more storage. I remember.
That's a great device, and the user interface the user interface and design work that was done on Zune became the basis for all future user interfaces at Microsoft. I mean, Xbox went there, Windows went there, the Windows Phone went there.
Wow.
But I joined that project about 9 months from launch. One of the senior engineering managers there called me knew I was going to looking for a different job. I'd done Xbox for 8 years. I was ready to move on. And he called me up and he said, hey, we could use your help over here. We're really struggling to get this thing coordinated and launched. And I got there, and sure enough, right, no one was on the same page about what they were trying to do. Launch vehicles were in different stages. We had an assumption that an external third party was going to deliver some capability to us, which to me became pretty clear pretty quickly it wasn't going to happen. So we had to make a different plan. And that's where I coined the phrase landing a 747 on a postage stamp.
That's pretty much impossible.
Yeah, pretty much impossible, right? And that was what we were being asked to do then on that project. It was because we were already behind, right? The iPod was way ahead, 90% market share at the time. And so that was a difficult project. I had to, in that case, I had to work with different teams to get them all aligned to what our shipping goals were, where they had multiple priorities. So the Zune app was effectively the Windows Media app in the first edition. So that team was the team building it, but they had Windows deliverables, and Zune didn't hold a candle to Windows in terms of priority within the company. So negotiating and working through how we get that work done, and the hardware, we were using a third-party hardware company, Toshiba at the time, was building the original Zune, that very first edition, and working with the hardware team to get them on the same page. And then I ended up having to build a team as well to do the marketplace, and actually we have the music store. So that was the toughest project I think I ever did. It was about a year's worth of time that really was long hours. The metaphorical sleep under your desk was not metaphorical. I mean, I literally was at, didn't leave my office for days at a time. But a ton of fun. Was a great, for me, that was a great launching pad in terms of my career, because I ended up running the marketplace there. Microsoft has this notion of partner, which is a very senior person in the company who sort of starts to participate in more leadership activities. And I made partner as part of the Zune project. And for me, those were the tough ones. And it was really about coordination. It was about managing disparate priorities, teams that were coming together who had never worked together, a vision. we had to actually, in classic case of, what not to do in leadership, we had co-leaders on that project. We had a leader who I traditionally worked with, a guy named Jay Allard, but then we also had a business leader, Brian Lee, and they were like two in a box to run the project. And that became difficult because anytime you have two people leading one project, it actually invites a lot of bad behavior in the teams underneath, because they sort of choose the uncle they want to go talk to make a decision. So I found that you had to sit them both down to say, hey, here's what we have to do. And I remember one very specific case where this partner of ours, who we pretty much decided we were kind of betting the launch of Zunon because they were going to be our marketplace. And I flew to New York with Brian to meet with them, and I left the meeting absolutely convinced they weren't going to do it. Like, they were saying all the right things in the meeting, but you could just tell from their body language and from the tenor of the meeting, this was not a priority for them. And if it didn't happen, it wasn't that big a deal. And so I came back and I sat both of them down and I said, listen, this isn't happening, right? Like, I need to go build this. Like, you guys are not going to get what you need. And Jay, who had worked with me for many, many years, looked at me and said, okay, go. And Brian looked at me like, and we had only worked together on Xbox, so he hadn't worked with me previously at Xbox, and he was nervous. He's like, oh no, like, we have this partner and they're going to do it for us, and can you actually do it? And but by getting them together, right, and saying, okay, together we have to make this decision, you guys got to support me. We made that decision and we went and did it, and it was hard. But by getting both of them in the room at the same time, coming to a common agreement, and then moving forward together, that was the only way. Because if I had done it with Jay and not Brian, right, Brian would have been a detractor, and I wouldn't have been able to be successful. And I'm not pointing fingers at Brian. I'm just saying that's the human nature of the situation. So that was a big learning lesson for me as well, right? Gathering people, getting them on board, and getting common support. Something I learned in spades at Amazon, right? One of their leadership principles is, have backbone, disagree, and commit. And fight like a dog when you're in the fight, right? But when the fight's over and the decision's made, then support it.
Yeah.
And no, I told you so's. Even if you are right in the long run, doesn't matter. Right, that's the decision that was made, and that's what we supported.
And that's very important. Again, we'll go back to the pride thing, right? Because a lot of people commit career suicide in technology because of the "I told you so." They get their voice heard, the decision is made against them, and they're just waiting for the thing to blow up to say, "I told you so," instead of saying, okay, they made that decision, they may have a better understanding than I do. Let's do whatever I can to support the decision and make it a priority and a success. Because at the end of the day, we're all working towards the same goal.
Exactly. I could not have said that better myself. The worst place you can put yourself in is waiting for failure, right? Like, do you gamble at all? Do you ever gamble?
I used to. I used to love to play Texas Hold'em. But
yeah. You're a technology guy, all right.
Yeah, because you can do some math there, right? You can see kind of like the cards that are on display. But another advice that I got was, the best thing that you can do, that it could happen to you when you go to a casino, especially in Vegas. The worst thing that could happen to you, the worst, is winning.
It's true. But the reason I bring that up is because I like to play craps, and I'm pretty specific about it. I'll put a certain amount of money in my pocket and say that's my, that's the money I'm going to spend that night. Similar to, hey, I'm going to go to a play and a nice dinner. Here's what I'll spend, right? But I like to play craps. But the thing that drives me crazy about playing craps is when someone comes to the table to play negative, right? Because when you can play craps, you can play to win, right? Or you can play for others to fail.
Yeah.
And to exactly to your point about technology, right? There's just something that feels bad, right, about playing for someone else to fail. And that's the "I told you so."
is
Right.
we go back to what we're talking about, the positive and the negative. You can always have a positive view of things and a negative view. And the negative view most likely will never be fruitful for anybody. I mean, you can turn everything negative into positive if you look at it in a different way. And it's, you always have that choice in your life, especially in technology. But let's look at circuits. What is a circuit? There is light or there's no light, right? There is electricity, like zeros and ones, right? Positive, negative. And when they work together, now we build computers and we have all this amazing technology, right? But it's the same thing in life. You always have the chance to choose positive or negative. And if you have a negative context, number one, even if you win playing negative, you're going to feel miserable. And you're going to build a culture in your team that eventually is going to break. Right?
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah. And at the end of the day, that culture in your team is a thing that will grow the success. Mm-hmm. A team that works together well, that is excited. Again, I'll go back to the metaphor of craps, right? When you're at a table that's hot, people are excited. People are screaming, like you're in a casino, all of a sudden you hear this, woo, big loud. And it's because someone at the craps table, got a 9 and that was the point. But if you're the guy at that table who actually goes, woo, because if someone rolled a 7, it's a single voice, it's not the chorus. Right. And that's the difference.
Doug, have you ever been leading a team where people just don't talk to each other because their profiles are not compatible? Especially I'm talking because you were involved in gaming, and my company was hired to help build a multi-million-dollar game. Only once in our lifetime, I promised to my team and myself that I will never ever work in a digital game again in my life, because it was so hard getting people to actually talk to each other, the different teams and the different disciplines inside the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will agree with that assessment. It being a game, first of all, it's hard. Building a game is hard. It's like any creative content, movies, music, books. You can't predict a winner. You never can. You just don't know what's going to happen. And so that varied set of opinions about what is the winning formula, is 100% subjective always. So you can never have a winner in that scenario because you just don't know. But the other thing is it's the biggest, gaming has the largest separation between the teams of anything I've ever worked on, because you have the creatives, the artists and the people doing the canon and the gameplay and all that. And then you have the technologists who are building the infrastructure and building the engine and, all of that stuff. And it's a very, very different set of skills. And creatives don't have much respect for people who work on plumbing, and plumbers don't have much respect for people who work on creatives, right? And that's a hard environment to work in. And leadership is so crucial there, because respect for both is critical. And I have been in an environment in the past where leadership respected creatives. They didn't respect operators. And so operators oftentimes were undervalued, under-reviewed, and then under-rewarded. And that makes for a really, a negative environment for those people. And so you have a high turnover and it's harder. But at the end of the day, you need both for a great game. If the gameplay is great, but every time you try to save your game, it doesn't work.
or the graphics are beautiful, but it takes 5 minutes to load the next scene.
Oh my gosh!
This project lasted. I worked on that project for 2 years. It has been one of the biggest projects where I learned the most important leadership lessons in my life. When we got there, the project had a 2-year limit and a $10 million budget. The budget was 80% spent and they had spent a year and a half already,
Mm.
and the project was 10% done. So they called us in as consultants, and the first thing that I did is I interviewed every leader, and then I interviewed the subordinates of the leader, so like 3-tier leadership. And when I realized every bridge between creative, front-end design, 3D modeling, back-end, database, every single bridge was broken. And, like I had a case with this very high-end, digital artist. He says, they are bugging me because they want to lower the resolution because they say the image is too big, but then my artwork is going to look horrible and it's not going to sell. And then I go to the backend guy and he says, if he doesn't lower the resolution, this thing will not work, will not load. And that was just the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, we had some really interesting cases like that in the early days of Xbox, because we made some real specific decisions about gameplay and how quickly games would load. And hopefully I didn't mention this in the last discussion, but in the very, very early days of Xbox, we would play a lot of PlayStation, and we would get a bunch of the early team members together, and we would sit in the conference room and we'd fire up a game. And the guy I mentioned earlier, Jay, was running the overall platform team at the time, and he would just keep saying incessantly, "Are we playing yet? Are we playing yet? Are we playing yet?" And the whole point was like, holy cow, I'm supposed to be gaming, not sitting here watching something load. Like, what is going on? And so now fast forward to, we're getting ready to launch Xbox, and our most important game, and I won't mention the game, but they had started to actually have this big, long loading thing at the beginning of their game. And we had a rule in our certification process that said, you had to be up and running within 30 seconds. And they were breaking another rule with this big, long loading thing, because we had a hard drive, which was unique at the time. And they were loading the game on the hard drive so it would run faster. And as the certification leader at the time, I'm like, no, you can't do that. Like, A, you're breaking rule 1, it's taking too long to load, and B, you're loading the hard drive, not allowed. But everyone was like, well, it's our most important game. Like, we have to load and do it. It's like, no, we don't. So we actually got on the phone with the head game designer and the head of the studio. And there's like 20 people in the room, and it was a Japanese company. So there was some interpreting going on, some discussion, and eventually it got to the point where the head of the studio said, we're doing it. And everyone in the room like froze, right? Because they're on the phone and it's all Microsoft people in the room, and they all look at me. And I'm sitting at the table, and I just said, no. And everyone went, and dead silence on the phone for like 10 seconds, which of course felt like 10 years. And then you hear the head of the game studio at a really low voice, and you hear this big, low, bellowing laugh. Okay, we'll fix it, right? And that was the discussion, right? But yeah, that yin and yang aspect of game development makes it hard.
Yeah.
And there's so many lessons, right, that play into that discussion we just had, right? How do you manage those things? How do you make sure that you're not setting bad precedent? It's like giving things away for free. I remember in early days of Xbox, because we were just starting, everyone wanted to give everything away for free. It's like, and then we'll make money later. It's like, you realize that if you give it away for free now, you'll never get people to pay for it later, ever. Like, you can start it out paying for it and make it free. That'll work fine, right? You can start out really expensive and make it less expensive. That's fine. You can't start it for free and say we're going to pay for it later. Right? That business model doesn't work. And so you have to put your foot down at times, right? Most important game, breaking the biggest rule. If you say yes to him, what are you going to do with everyone else who wants to break that rule? Right? You're going to have to say yes to them as well. And then your core principle that you had has just failed. And you have core principles for a reason.
Talking about pricing the game, this particular game that we worked for, it was the iteration, was the second version of this title, and this company you never know what game is going to make it or not, right? It's a huge,
Yeah.
but this company, they were not a software company. They were not a gaming company. They actually, the great grandfather of this family-run business invented the teddy bear. And he was one of the first persons that opened a factory in China. So they were actually suppliers of gift shops in the whole North America. It was multi-billion-dollar business, but they were creating gift items that just you buy on gift shops, and they came with this idea with a summer student. They hired a summer student, and he was a developer, and they came with this idea to create just a plain web-based game that was attached to an avatar of one of the teddy bears they will sell. So the only way to play the game was to buy the teddy bear, and the teddy bear had the code to get into the game. Honestly, if they spend $200,000 in this thing, they spend too much. They made $700 million the first year in sales.
Wow.
$700 million. After the second launch, they started because now we had data, we made an enterprise level, we knew what was happening. It's crazy. Half the time the gameplay was done by the moms, not by the kids, because the moms wanted to get the kids advanced to the next level. But every level you have to buy another toy, right?
That's a metaphor for kind of the Gen X life, isn't it?
I mean, it's incredible because they when you see the revenues and the profits from the game compared to the rest of the company, it was 100% better.
Yeah, margins in software is good if you do it right.
How many games though have you seen that they invest millions and millions and it flops, right?
Yeah, you can't pick winners. You can't. I mean, it's just too hard. You never really know what consumer sentiment is going to be at any moment.
Right.
And is it successful or not? What's a great movie? What's not? Really the only way to sort of ensure, and even this is not truly, a given, is a franchise. If you build a great first game, if you build a crappy second game, it's still probably going to sell, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you build a crappy third game, it ain't going to sell because you had a crappy second game, right? But if you consistently build good games in a franchise, you're likely to have a good game after that. And you're as long as you don't break the rules of, hey, don't build garbage, you'll be fine. But other than that, right? I mean, and you see that even in music, right? Like a band comes out, they have great music. Their second album comes out, it sells half as. Of all the things I've done in my career, working in the gaming world has probably been one of the hardest jobs. And it isn't because building games is particularly hard. It's building great games with a great team that's all pulling on the oars together is hard. Because you're just so disparate in the types of people that it takes to build a great game. The magic really is leadership. If you see a studio that's consistently coming out with great games, I'm going to show you a studio leader who's really good at this job.
Yeah, and the employees are happy too, because another thing that I noticed is that the whole entire dev team in this company, because they were not a technology company, they were treated like warehouse workers. Not that they were warehouse workers don't have to be treated bad, but they were looked down upon in a way that they had to point cards. It was almost like a blue collar job. That's how they treated them. So they were completely demoralized, because it was a warehouse. Actually, you had 200 game developers in a warehouse with no windows, working 12 to 13 hours a day. So the first thing that I did is come on, you guys are multi-billionaires. Give us a building, a proper building. They had a real estate company, by the way. So they got us a building with beautiful windows and light shining through. And we changed the carpeting, we changed the colors, and we started creating a better culture for the coders. And that alone created wonders.
Yeah, I agree with that. I did have those early days of Zune. Microsoft had taken over another company's space and buildings that was around kind of the next block over, and one of the buildings they had was a records building, which was kind of a warehouse, right? No windows, high ceilings, the whole bit, and was just a big empty building. And they put a zillion cubes in there and just moved us in there. And it was horrible. It was the worst ever, because you're exactly right. You're in a cave, you don't have natural light.
You get demoralized very quickly, right?
You get demoralized, for sure.
I remember one of the coders saying the worst mistake that somebody can do is be in love with gaming and then become a game developer, because you just steal your passion for gaming.
That's probably true, actually.
Doug, thank you so much for your time. More than 40 minutes have gone by again. And
Yes.
I really appreciate your coming back to the show. I wish you the best on your new endeavor. Tell me, Doug, if people like to follow you, are you on LinkedIn? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Just Douglas Hebenthal or Doug Hebenthal. I think it's Douglas, maybe. I don't remember. But I do want to mention I am starting a new gig. So beginning in April, or beginning this year, I'll be working for a company called Aspirion. I'll be the CTO, running all aspects of technology for the company. We're what's in the healthcare business, we're called a revenue cycle management company. And so what we do is we work with providers, hospitals and doctors who've had claims denied, and we help them recover that money. For me, it's a great opportunity to be a CTO of another really great company, but it's also a mission-based opportunity, because the more we can help that sort of end that negative cycle of payers having so much power against providers, the more we can help people, even downstream individual patients, right, who then don't become responsible for those fees. So I'm pretty excited about it. It's a great company. Maybe in a year or two, we'll come back and talk about how we've been able to use AI to improve the overall denial management process.
That's beautiful. I put myself a calendar note. 12 months from now, I'll be bugging you again.
Sounds great.
One of the greatest fulfillments for a leader in technology is to end up in a career where you're really moving the needle the right way, helping people, right?
Exactly. I'm super drawn to this position because of that exact reason.
Yeah. One of the things why I didn't want to do a game again in my life is because it was so hard. And at the end of the day, it was just entertainment. So I was like, what? I mean, we got paid very handsomely. Don't get me wrong. We all made a lot of money. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, we have a game where kids can go and play after work and their moms get entertained during lunch. That's it. Right? I mean, I didn't see the value. Like, we're not saving lives like you're going to be doing now, or helping people pay for their healthcare, right?
Yeah. It's important stuff. But I agree with you completely. You get to a point in your career. I have had two experiences in my life which really helps me, say this is a great thing to do. One, my mom had a hip replacement when she was about 75 years old. And she didn't have great balance after she got the surgery done, but the hospital wanted to send her home, but said they can't because she's a fall risk. And the insurance company didn't want to pay for a rehab center. And so she ended up staying in the hospital 2 weeks longer than she needed to because of this argument, right? Over they won't send her home, but the insurance company won't pay for rehab. So everyone lost. Because the insurance company paid more than they should have. My mom was stuck in the hospital 2 weeks longer than she should have been. And to me, that's always a big one that I go, that's crazy, right? And then the other one is my sister's a dietitian, and she specializes in eating disorders. And she opened up her own intensive outpatient clinic, which focused on 5 to 6 people at a time working on their eating disorders. And they would come in, she would teach them how to cook, she would work with them on their diets, very intensive stuff. But the insurance companies would never pay on time or never pay. And the business eventually failed because, she didn't have the cash flow to keep the business open. So those two things weigh heavily on me. It's like, what can I do to help them in the long run not have these kind of problems, right? And this particular job, I think, will help that a lot. And, if we can figure out how to get much more automated, right, by making smart decisions through, machine learning, where today it's all human driven, We're gaining lots of data from the human-driven aspect of it. We can build machine learning on top of that and make it a more automated process, do 10 times, 20 times the throughput. You're going to have a real difference. And so that's what we're going to try to do. David,
congratulations on your new position for sure. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited about it. And I want to thank you. I mean, this has been great. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I love your platform that you're leveraging here to get technology information out and leadership concepts out to people. Strongly supportive of that. So thank you for everything you're doing.
My pleasure. Look, this fulfillment is what keeps me going. And if the Lord wants me to keep doing this is going to actually, it just keeps growing. Though. Like I started in February 2023, so like a year and a half ago, and it just keeps increasing. This podcast is becoming so popular that it's already competing with the business podcast that I have that is 4 years old.
Wow, that's great. That's really great.
So thank you so much for your participation. Guests like you is that makes this podcast popular. And I wish you the best on your next assignment. And I'll be circling back to you in about a year from now.
You should do that for sure. And I really have enjoyed doing this. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Doug. God bless you.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.